It's one of those times, guys. Sports are officially back. Football's almost back. MLB's producing news. NBA's producing news. We got a big show coming up for you today. And Jared, we're going to start with the NBA because free agency officially started yesterday. Obviously, we've been hearing rumors about trades, about free agent signings for, probably the last couple of weeks. But everything is starting to be official now as far as signings go. We've already had a couple big free agent signings. So we'll get off to it, Jared. Who do we want to start with? But at the end of this segment, we are going to let you celebrate a trade that's official. We'll wait on that a little bit. I think you guys all know what that's going to be. But we're going to talk about every other team before that. Or not every other team, but all the other big trades. But, Jared, what do we want to start with today? We had so much to start with and so much to talk about here in the NBA.
We can start with the max contracts. You got Trey Young of Atlanta, obviously getting his max contract. I think it was like $207 million. Obviously, Chris Paul staying with Phoenix. He gets his big contract. There was a little, hesitancy after the NBA Finals as to whether Chris Paul was really going to come back or if he was going to be persuaded by perhaps LeBron James to come play, for him in a Lakers uniform. And so obviously he chooses to stay with Phoenix with that young team and run it back. And, that team seems to be on the rise, as in this wasn't a one-hit wonder for them. I think this team is going to be motivated more than ever to come back. So I think we start right there, man. Right?
Let's do it.
This team made it to the finals in the Phoenix Suns, right? Obviously lost to Milwaukee, but they still have a very formidable team, not really losing many players. If all, Chris Paul would have been the biggest loss, but they get to keep him now on a 4-year deal. Let's talk about his contract, actually, because
absolutely.
Chris Paul is no spring chicken, and he gets a 4-year max deal of $160 million. I no disrespect to Chris Paul because he deserves like all that money, but would you have given him a 4-year contract? Like, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look at it right now, but I'm pretty sure the guy is like 30, 35, 36.
Jared, it doesn't make any sense. Like this is the one thing to talk about with this contract is that, we've seen a lot of other free agents sign. We've seen a lot of other guys get extended, like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, like Trey Young, like you mentioned. Chris Paul gets extended the same amount of years as those guys. That doesn't make sense because I think clearly we saw, what looks like the end of Chris Paul's prime in the finals. Whether he was in his prime, I realistically he's not in his prime anymore, but we really saw, I think, the end of Chris Paul's superstardom in the finals, and it was one of the reasons that they didn't win the championship because Paul was missing easy shots. He was turning the ball over. It happens to everybody. We're starting to see it in LeBron too, right? It's not a foreign thing. But to give the guy a 4-year contract that's worth $40 million, that two of those things are wrong there. The years are wrong, and I think the money's wrong. Maybe give him 50 the first 2 years, give him 30 the next two, the years after that, or 55, 55, 25, 25, and make it realistic to what his age is going to be producing, in 2023 and 2024. But I didn't understand this contract at all on either side of it. And I think the Suns are going to struggle to sign free agents now because they, in the next couple of years, and they almost made it so that they have only maybe a 1-2 year window to win the finals now, I feel like, because they're going to have to extend Ayton. Are they going to have the money for that? I don't know. Maybe the NBA has some crazy TV deals that come up and the money just gets moved up and the salary cap gets bumped up and a $40 million contract doesn't mean what it means today. But as of right now, this contract doesn't make sense. And I think it hurts the Suns more than it helps them.
Right. And the thing that I go to, and you touched on it, was the Phoenix Suns have a couple of players, including DeAndre Ayton, who are going to be up for max contracts within the next year or two.
Absolutely.
Right. So you already have Devin Booker making $29 million. You now have Chris Paul at $40 million a year. You're going to have DeAndre Ayton, who is most certainly going to ask for a max contract, whether he truly deserves it or not. I think his play in the regular season and the first half of the postseason, that's what him and his agent or agents plural will probably lean on when it comes to his contract negotiations. And then I think even a guy like Mikal Bridges is going to want a big contract, right? Cameron Payne played lights out in the playoffs, and I'm not saying that he's going to get a max contract, but that's a guy that they're going to obviously want to retain, and he's not going to be cheap either. So, you're right. I don't disagree with the Suns bringing back Chris Paul, but I think the contract and the way that things were structured is a little head scratching to me, because I'm not so sure that they're going to have enough money to keep this core nucleus around, unless they just want to go way over the luxury tax, like the Brooklyn Nets or the Lakers in a sense, and just pay $100 million in luxury tax. I mean, I guess you're paying for wins, which other teams are doing as well. If the owner doesn't mind doing that, then hey, go ahead, be my guest. But just looking at it contractually right now, I think, either whether it's Cameron Payne or Mikal Bridges, one of these glue guys could potentially not be in a Phoenix Suns uniform for the foreseeable future. Now, maybe they can work it out for this upcoming season, 2022, but going beyond, I don't know if they'll be able to keep this nucleus together and be, looking back, in 10 years from now, to say that they weren't able to do that because they signed Chris Paul at the age of 36 to a 4-year contract of $160 million. We're all going to look back and scratch our heads even more than we are right now, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the Brooklyn Nets, because I had their salary caps. I had their money situation up on my screen right here, and they're the best example of, like you said, a team that is deciding to go over the salary cap, pay 3 different guys max money. They have James Harden at $44 million for this next year, Kevin Durant $42 million, and Kyrie Irving $35 million. They even have Joe Harris at $17 million. When you look at the Suns, now they have Chris Paul at 40, Devin Booker's only at 31, which helps. But then you have, exactly. But then you have DeAndre Ayton, who's, he's at $12 million right now on the rookie contract. But it's going to be 40, right? And the position of center is even more valuable because, there's not a lot of centers that get paid a lot. So a center that gets a max contract, he's one of the best centers in the league, so he's going to get a max contract. He's not going to not get a max contract because maybe he plays point guard or shoot, he's one of these guys like Dennis Schroeder, who's going to get paid $25 million a year because he's just a point guard, but he's not as good as Chris Paul, right? So, the Suns are going to be in trouble when they have to pay DeAndre Ayton. Like you said, maybe they have to get rid of a glue guy like Mikal Bridges or Cam Johnson or Cam
Johnson.
They're not going to be able to keep those guys, and they're not going to be able to sign multiple mid-level exceptions like Jay Crowder. They're only going to be able to sign one, like the Nets, who signed Blake Griffin, right? So, and the difference with the Nets is all 3 of those guys are realistically still in their prime. Harden's in his prime, Kyrie's in his prime, and Durant, he's still in his prime, right? Maybe a year or 2 from now he's not, but we were talking about Kevin Durant being the best player in the league right now. And he's with Harden and Kyrie. That's not the Suns, okay? Devin Booker is not there yet. DeAndre Ayton isn't there yet. And Chris Paul is on the way down. So, I agree with you, Jared. I think this is a mistake. I think they maybe saw Devin Booker's contract not being that high. And like I said, maybe the Suns owner, who's arguably one of the worst owners in the NBA, Robert Sarver, thinks that there's going to be a big bump in the salary cap so that 40 and 30 for Devin Booker and Chris Paul doesn't mean as much, and they can throw 45 at 8 and not be a big deal. But I think, you don't go big 3 with a 38-year-old. that doesn't seem to make sense. I've never seen that, right, Jerry? You don't sign a 38-year-old and have that guy be the third guy and supposed to realistically the top guy. So big mistake there by the Suns, but we'll see how it plays out. Maybe it gets them a championship. And when you win a championship, Jared, as we know, it doesn't matter who the hell's on your roster. It matters that you won that championship. Your city gets to celebrate it. Now, let's talk about the other major news that came out as far as a player getting released from his contract and going unrestricted. That's Kawhi Leonard. He did the same thing that Chris Paul did, But a lot of people expect Kawhi to stay with Clippers, much like Chris Paul did. Now, I'll just go off on this one. I think absolutely 100% he's going to stay with the Clippers because and guys, of course he was going to become an unrestricted free agent. This is the NBA. These guys control everything. Okay, they control the whole thing, right? They're going to get as much money as possible. They switch whatever teams they want. This is not as surprising as people saw. And you saw, 9 p.m. Pacific time. This was coming out because it's 12 o'clock Eastern time, and the minute they can become unrestricted free agents, they became unrestricted free agents. But Kawhi Leonard will be back with the Clippers. He'll sign something similar to what Chris Paul signed, except he's not 35, 36, and we won't be talking about that. Maybe a little bit more money because Kawhi is considered one of the best in the league. But I think after what the Clippers did without him and seeing that this roster is maybe a little bit more formidable than people thought, even without him, I think he's looking at this team and going, you know what? I think this team legitimately can win a championship with me, and I'm going to sign back. And looking at obviously what happened with the Lakers, what we're going to talk about in a second, it's going to be tough in the West. But, I think that when you compare teams like the Suns and Clippers, it's really close. Denver and the Clippers, it's really close. And the Clippers realistically only have two guys. So I think Kawhi is like, you know what? I'm good. I'm coming back in. I think it has to do with the fact that what that team did against the Suns, almost defeating them and being within, 2 last-second calls and 2 last-second plays in that Suns series from going to the NBA Finals and most likely losing to the Bucks, right? But so it's pretty close, and I think Kawhi sees that, and I can't imagine them going anywhere else, especially after we hear of a Kyle Lowry going to Miami and a lot of other players signing other places. So, I think the writing's on the wall, specifically with that Miami Duncan Robinson getting an extension and Kyle Lowry signing over there with Jimmy Butler. I think that's writing that Kawhi's probably going to end up having to go back to the Clippers, unless he wants to go to the 76ers or something like that and join that team, right? Or what are your thoughts on this, Jared? Because obviously I'm a biased fan, but I just think that after seeing how it's laid out in free agency and what happened with the Lakers, I think Kawhi really doesn't have another place to go besides the Clippers. And I think that he also just sees how that team played and goes, okay, well, this is potentially an NBA Finals team without another superstar,
Right, potentially. And that's why I partially agree with the statements that you just made. I do think that Kawhi made the right decision to decline the $36 million option for this upcoming season, right? He obviously has an opportunity to make more money down the road in the long run. So that was smart on his part. Now, I do think he will resign with the Clippers for this upcoming season. I'm just not so sure that it will be for a multi-year deal. He could sign a 4-year max contract, and I think it averages to be like 176 million, right, over the span of those 4 years. Or he could sign a 1-year deal with the Clippers, right, for potentially a little bit more than $36 million and do a one and done scenario, see how this year plays out. Because let's remember, yes, the Clippers did show some promise without Kawhi when Paul George was running the show in the playoffs. But still, in the last 2 years, this team has not, basically executed their goal and won a championship when you have Kawhi Leonard and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. So to me, how much more does Kawhi Leonard, how many more years does he have to give and wait? He knows what it takes to win a championship. He did it with the Spurs. He did it with Toronto Raptors. I mean, how many years are you going to give the Clippers? I'm not putting this all on Kawhi. He unfortunately was injured, and you can't do anything about that. But I'm just looking at this team and the way that they're constructed, and it's like they get right there. They get so close. They get to the second round, and then they finally make it past the second round. But are they really contenders to make it to the finals? I think that's something that Kawhi is going to have to sit down with this Clippers management and say, okay, what are we going to do, right? If I sign a max contract with you guys, are we going to have enough money to go out and get other players, right? Or are we going to have to dip into the luxury tax like the Brooklyn Nets and like potentially the Suns are, who we just talked about right now? So to me, I could see Kawhi signing just a 1-year deal, kind of like a one and done scenario, seeing how this upcoming season plays out with the Clippers, And if they don't make it to the finals, or if they don't win the NBA championship, I could see him leaving and saying, okay, I've been in LA now for 3 years and it just didn't work. It's time for me to move on. Also, another enticing thing for Kawhi to only sign a 1-year deal is if he leaves, he could then sign a max deal with another team for 5 years and $235 million. So $235 million sounds a lot more than $176 million, right? Now, that's just a different scenario that I wanted to throw out to you. I mean, he obviously could sign long-term and just say, I'm a Clipper for the rest of my career, or at least the rest of my prime. But if I'm him, the way that the first 2 seasons went in LA, I'm not so sure that I'm just going to sign on for the next 4 years, right? And I'm not saying that the ownership and management have not done a good job of bringing in other players. It's just, listen, I'm sorry, man. And this could be the Lakers fan in me coming out. There's just a Clipper curse, right? There's a reason why for the first 60 years of the Clippers' history, they never made it out of the second round. They finally do this past season, and what happens? Chris Paul gets injured, right? And then it's really on Paul George to take over. And I will give them credit. They played a lot better than I think most expected without their best player. I thought they were going to get swept. I didn't think it was going to even be a series, and they made it more than just a series. So I will give them credit where credit is due. I just don't know if this team, as constructed, can actually win a championship and go up against the likes of the daunted West, and then have to play either the Brooklyn Nets or potentially the Milwaukee Bucks in the finals, right? Easily the 2 best teams in the East. I mean, the Clippers have had, they did the same thing when they had Lob City, when they had Chris Paul, DeAndre, Jordan team for 4, 5, 6 years. It didn't pan out. They've now, if they do keep Kawhi, they will have this team for going on a 3rd year, basically the same team constructed. And so far, no championship result. How many opportunities are you going to give until you just say, listen, and I'm not saying he's a quitter, right? He's walking away.
No, of course
it's not. Just for him. No. This guy, he's trying to win championships. And I don't know if the Clippers organization is the right place for Kawhi to win a championship.
2 other things, actually 3 other things, really quickly, why Kawhi will come back, just to prove you wrong, Jared. But I'll tell you this. I'm glad that you gave the Clippers credit. It's a rare moment on this podcast. You gave them credit, respect. But I did need that history lesson of all those years we didn't make it. But there's 3 things. One, I don't, like I said, where the hell is Kawhi going to go that's going to be comfortable for his lifestyle? The guy loves the sun. He doesn't like playing in the cold like he had to in Toronto. Right, there's a reason he left the team that won the championship. Right, he's not going to New York. Right, Miami signed up there.
He can go wherever he wants.
No, Jared, he doesn't like that. No, Jared, he wants to be.
Kawhi Leonard said, "I want out of LA." He's like, "I want to stay in a warm weather city." The Suns. He can go to Miami. He can go to Dallas.
No, he's not going to go to Miami. Miami can't get him. They got Kyle Lowry, they got Jimmy Butler, they got Duncan Robinson signed up. They got all these guys, man. They don't have enough room for him. Maybe Tyler Hero, a couple of years. Miami said no. We'll go with somebody else. We'll go with the other guy that won the championship with him in Toronto, Kawhi. Here's the thing. So I think realistically, living situation, Kawhi obviously being from the hometown Clippers, that's why he came to the team. I think that's a big factor here. And the fact that all the other teams kind of have other guys, meaning the Miami Heat and Lakers. And then when you look at the roster, I mean, Jared, they still have Paul George. They have Marcus Morris Sr., and they still have glue guys like Beverly, Ibaka, Rondo, Zubac, Terrence Mann, Nicholas Batum. I mean, this roster is essentially the same thing. They also drafted 2 very solid players in the NBA draft. They picked these guys a lot higher, or they kind of got them as steals in the draft. I don't have their names down because the NBA draft just isn't what it is now, and they weren't on the salary cap yet. But this roster is filling out to be a solid one. Then you combine that with Ty Lue, and I think Kawhi saw what Ty Lue did with LeBron. He saw what Ty Lue did with this team in the playoffs. Man, there's no other better situation right now, at least for this year. Like you said, I wouldn't totally disagree with you, Jared, that he might sign a 1 or 2 year deal, maybe 2 year deal with a player option after the year 1, right? But I do think he signs back with the Clippers no matter what. I'll give you guys a guarantee here on the Cover 2 podcast. Kawhi Leonard is back with the Clippers by the end of August. I'm saying that right now. He's back with
I will. The Clippers have had a solid roster for years. Where's that gotten them? That's all I got to say.
Stop it, Jared. Stop it.
That's all I got to say.
Okay. Let's let my man Jared Smith celebrate here on the podcast a little bit, because we've been burying the lead of NBA news, for this whole podcast so far. And the biggest thing that's happened in the NBA is not Chris Paul, getting off becoming an unrestricted free agent, signing with the Suns. It's not Kawhi Leonard becoming an unrestricted free agent. It ain't Kyle Lowry signing with the Miami Heat. It is the fact that the Lakers pulled off the steal of the century in what is one of the most lopsided trades I've ever seen, getting Russell Westbrook to combine with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Celebrate that, man, because I cannot believe that actually happened. Now the Lakers got a big three, and they are top contenders in the league. Celebrate.
You might be a little surprised right now. I mean, do not get me wrong. I love Russell Westbrook, right? Westbrook.
No. Wait a minute.
Just listen. I love me some Russell Westbrook. His tenacity, the way that he plays on the court, he's got that Mamba mentality where it's doggy friends with you off the court, but the moment that ball tips, he's trying to literally destroy you, right? And I think that's something that the Lakers have lacked, because LeBron James, for as great as he is, right, the championships he's won, Hall of Fame, all that stuff, he doesn't seem to have that dog mentality, give me the ball at the last second. I just want to completely bury you and your team. So, and Anthony Davis isn't necessarily that way either. It's the reason why I like Montrezl Harrell in the last offseason in free agency, because he was just that dog. He was that guy that came in. He was scrappy. He didn't necessarily care about, all the points and all that stuff. He would do the dirty work. And even though Russell Westbrook is a walking triple-double, he is a guy that will get in as a guard, get rebounds. He'll get dirty. He doesn't mind, getting in someone's face. And I think that's something that the Lakers need. So, obviously, on paper, having Russell Westbrook, that name, to pair along with LeBron James and Anthony Davis is huge, right? On paper, the Lakers should be in the finals, and it really shouldn't even be that much of a question. The real question should be, who's coming out of the East? Is it going to be Brooklyn, or is it going to be Milwaukee, who the Lakers are facing? On paper, that's really what it is. But when I actually look at it and being a realistic fan, the Lakers need shooting, man.
Right?
They don't have.
They do. I agree.
Who?
They have nobody now. They're Wayne
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
they don't have any shooters, right? I'm sorry, but LeBron James, when he won championships with Miami, and the year in Cleveland, and even though obviously he won with the Lakers in the bubble, he had guys like Ray Allen. He had Kyle Korver. He had straight snipers. Yes, they may not have been the best defenders. They may not have an all-around offensive game where they can get their own shot. But guess what? In transition, when Braun's running down the lane in the middle of the floor, he can either drive to the basket himself, or he can dish it to the corner to Kyle Korver or Ray Allen or one of his snipers, James, and he can trust that those guys are going to knock down threes. I'm looking at the Lakers roster right now, and I'm sorry, but I can't tell you one single guy that I would wholeheartedly trust to simply knock down threes for an entire game. Maybe Wes Matthews, who's like a 3-and-D guy, maybe. But they signed who else? The Lakers signed Trevor Ariza, Kent Bazemore. They're literally running back teams from the 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? They re-signed Dwight Howard, a former Laker. Kent Bazemore and Trevor Ariza were also former Lakers, and also not relatively young players either, right? So this is shaping up to be obviously an exciting team that will put up points and win games. I'm just not so sure that this is a championship configured roster, because they don't have any money as of right now. The only way that they can sign players, the only way they signed Trevor Ariza, Kent Bazemore, Dwight Howard, was on veteran minimum contracts. They literally have zero money to go out and pay for another decent player that can come in and really contribute, right? Like if LeBron James or Anthony Davis gets hurt, what are the Lakers going to do? Are they really going to lean on a Dwight Howard, a Kent Bazemore, a Trevor Ariza? I'm sorry, no, right? They lost Alex Caruso. Obviously, in the trade for Russell Westbrook, they had to give up Kyle Kuzma, KCP, and Montrezl Harrell. So those guys are now gone. And it's looking like Dennis Schroeder isn't going to be able to stay around either, because Schroeder is going to want $100 million. And the Lakers do not have the money to give unless they really want to go over the luxury tax, which the Lakers in the past have had problems. I'm just not so sure with Russell Westbrook in the fold that Dennis Schroeder will be willing to take a back seat and come off the bench, because we all know Russell Westbrook ain't coming off the bench. That's not happening, no right? Way. So, Russell Westbrook currently right now is slated to make $41 million next year. LeBron James is on the books for $39 million, and Anthony Davis is on the books for a mere $32 million.
Ooh,
that's right, a mere $32 million. Then you get Trevor Ariza coming over. He's got $12.8 million on the books. The rest of the guys are hovering around $2-3 million, kind of filling out the rest of the roster. But yeah, it's just, I mean, listen, I'm excited because of the name and because of what Russell Westbrook can bring as far as a leadership role and making sure that guys are always engaged and never taking a day or taking plays off. But I just don't know how this team, there's only one basketball to go around, right? LeBron James is normally the guy that likes to have the ball in his hands, but so is Russell Westbrook. So who is going to kind of give up that point guard leadership role for the benefit of the team? I'm not so sure who's going to do that. And like I said, at the end of the day, I don't really see any shooters on this team that I think LeBron or Russell Westbrook can really rely on as knockdown shooters in a game. I don't see it right now. Like, there is no JJ Redick on this team. There is no Kyle Korver on this team. There is no Ray Allen on this team. I don't see it at all. So while I'm happy for the move, I'm not jumping for joy and ecstatic, because I don't think this is a complete team as of yet.
It sounds like Jared Smith wanted maybe a player that rhymes with the color teal, or maybe there used to be a old clothing manufacturing store at malls called Dillard's. I think you wanted something that rhymed with maybe one of those two players, because there's a superstar mentality and a shooting presence there that would have helped out the Lakers. Jared, I agree with you. This trade, it makes sense to have the big three. And I do think that the Lakers are, 1A, 1B in the West now as far as most likely being contenders. But I realistically, I agree with everything you said as far as the shooting goes. I mean, man, these free agents that they're signing, Jared, this reminds me like playing NBA 2K. And like just getting all the stars and then just signing whoever's like a free agent name that I kind of knew, right? That like is old. Like Dwight Howard. Right? It's literally NBA 2K. That's what they're doing. They just stacked up their team with a bunch of names. You got LeBron, right? Nothing wrong with LeBron. Nothing wrong with Davis. Nothing wrong with Westbrook. But with that, the style play with Westbrook and LeBron specifically, and then you throw Davis in there, who's kind of, he's a big guy, lob guy, right? That's just better than a lot of the others, right? But the way his situation works on this team is he doesn't facilitate as much as LeBron and Russell Westbrook would. Then you have no shooting. You're right. It's like, how the hell are the Lakers going to really score more points than they did last year? It's like, yeah, LeBron will have some more time off, I guess, and he'll be able to kind of relax during the season and save himself for the playoffs. But realistically, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then, but I'll be realistic here with the way this trade worked. Jared, they weren't going to get Lillard and Beal because they couldn't give up enough, right? The only way this trade was going to work is for, no offense, a secondary superstar like Russell Westbrook. I think when you look at Lillard, he's a top 10 guy in the NBA, right? No argument. Top 10 guy, maybe top 5, right? When you look at Beal, shooting-wise, he's a top 10 shooter in the NBA, right? And then you look at him as a player, top 15, top 20. I think Russell Westbrook, after all these years of not making the finals and not winning a championship, he falls down the list of superstar every single year this doesn't happen, right? And you look at guys, the way Paul George played in the playoffs. Paul George is bumping up ahead of him, right? Devin Booker. There's realistically, you still probably could put Chris Paul ahead of him because Chris Paul at least led his team to a championship, right? Now, I know the Wizards roster is not anything like the Suns roster, but still, it's all those years with Durant and Westbrook. The fact that they did not win a finals just shows you something was wrong. And obviously Durant, it's not Durant. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think the Lakers were strapped here. They didn't have enough to give up. They would have had to give up THT. They would have had to give up mortgage their future, along with giving up Kuzma, Harrell. Schroeder not signing didn't help either. Obviously, they weren't able to throw Schroeder in a deal potentially as well. But yeah, I agree with you. I think this makes the Lakers a legitimate contender, whereas I think if they wouldn't have had Russell Westbrook, we would have been talking about them not as being a top 10 contender in the West. It would have been really on LeBron's shoulders to make it happen. Now it's a little easier, but yeah, when you look at championship-wise, I don't know how they spread the ball around like a team like the Nets, like we saw the Bucks play. There's still nobody to stop Giannis, right? And even the Suns, the way they played, it's tough. It's tough. I agree with it. I agree with it. I don't mean to rain on Lakers parade here. Like I love that Westbrook's coming back to his hometown. Maybe that helps him out. Maybe he changes his mentality of playing with LeBron, right? Maybe LeBron somehow rises him up because LeBron's been able to rise guys like Alex Caruso, who I think was a big loss for the Lakers. I think they should have re-signed him as well. Go over the luxury tax, man. You're in Los Angeles. Like no LA team should be not going over the luxury tax. Look at the Dodgers, right? Like every year they facilitate their contracts to like barely go over the luxury tax because Andrew Friedman's just a freak and is able to manipulate the market every year. But I mean, they still signed the guy for $45 million. It's not going to play another game for him in Trevor Bauer, right? They made a mistake, right? They didn't know what was going to happen there, but still, teams make mistakes. But they're like, okay, we'll go get a superstar, which I'll get into in a second. But I agree with you. Russell Westbrook doesn't fit what the Lakers needed. He does fit that they needed another superstar, but now strapped for cash, the Lakers roster is, kind of screwed here. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, you have Ariza, Ellington, Howard, Gasol. Like, come on. Like, that's not a good bench. One of my friends said the Lakers had a good bench last year. I was like, hey, that's why they lost in the first round? A lot of the teams with good benches that didn't make it. But, Jared, I'll get you last say on this. Last say on the Lakers. What can they do? What can they do to fix the roster?
Listen, LeBron James needs to put his GM cap on. He needs to go recruiting this offseason and basically look up three-point shooter in the league that is either a free agent or someone that they could do a sign and trade for, or someone that is willing to take a veteran minimum contract and basically say, hey, we need you to come on this team. Because very simply right now, it doesn't take a genius to be able to scout and play defense against this Lakers team, right? We know what this team wants to do. They want to run in transition. When this team is in transition, I think they're going to be very formidable, very almost unstoppable, right? But if you get the Lakers in a half court, they don't have any three-point shooting or any guys that would necessarily scare you. That you have to say, okay, stick on this guy no matter what. Like, don't come help side, right? You have to stay on this guy or he's going to kill us. There is no one on this Lakers team that you have to worry about in that sense. So if I'm a defense going up against the Lakers, I'm forcing Russell Westbrook or LeBron James or Anthony Davis to shoot threes. I'm backing off of them. If they beat me because those three, shot, 40 or 50% from 3-point range and beat us, then you have to wipe your hands. But I am not letting those guys drive to the basket and get and ones, right? If they do drive to the basket, I'm collapsing with all 5 defenders and forcing them to then kick it out to a non-3-point shooter. And like I said, once again, if they make threes, you can live with that. What you can't live with is this Lakers team getting out in transition on the fast break and or driving and getting and ones, because that is really what their current strength is, and their weakness is 3-point shooting. So I just, like I said, they're going to have to get in the weight room because I think this team is going to have to do a lot of work in the paint as of right now.
Yeah.
And LeBron James is going to have to really get on the road or get on the phone and put his GM cap on and make some calls to guys that are willing to come and potentially take less money. Now, whether LeBron James, cuts him off a check on the back end or says, hey, man, I'm going to get you in the next Space Jam, I don't know what it's going to take because as of right now, this team doesn't have the money necessarily to do it. They're going to have to come up with other ways to bring in some players. So a good roster, obviously a great big three, but not necessarily a championship roster in my eyes, not a complete roster as of yet. But that doesn't mean that can't change.
True. Yeah, still some time, obviously. But yeah, a little bit puzzling, but I think the Lakers couldn't do much more with the players they had in their roster to trade. Good for them for finding a way. Like I said, it's still a steal. It's still a steal trading those guys that they did for Russell Westbrook. Very impressive. All right, we need to move on. We're 35 minutes in, and we have two other sports to talk about. So let's get into it. We're going to move to the MLB. And, I gave Jared the opportunity, guys, to celebrate the Russell Westbrook trade because I thought he was going to go nuts. He didn't. Now I'm going to give myself a chance to celebrate here the biggest acquisition from the trade deadline in the MLB. And that is my boys, the Dodgers. By the way, let me just throw this out here. I will be representing wearing this exact same hat, wearing this exact same shirt tonight at Dodger Stadium. We were recording on Tuesday, August 3rd against the lauded Houston Astros. It's the first time the Astros are coming back to Dodger Stadium with fans in attendance. I went earlier this year to the Angels' first game against the Astros. A couple Dodgers fans showed up, a couple trash cans ended up on the field. People were ejected. Angels' big come from behind win and a lot of booing. I don't know what to expect in what is now 7 hours from now or 9 hours from now when I go to this game, but it's going to be impressive. It's going to be fun. All right. And the guy that the Dodgers got is starting tomorrow on Wednesday against the Astros too. And that is my boy, Max Scherzer. Mad Max, two different eyes. He looks like an Australian shepherd, right? But with all that said, one of the best pitchers in Major League Baseball comes to the Dodgers. And not only that, they somehow grabbed Trey Turner, who's one of the top up-and-coming shortstops in the MLB. He's also a utility player by trade. He plays the outfield. He plays second base as well. But he was an all-star shortstop. So the Dodgers get, yes, albeit an older superstar pitcher, much like Justin Verlander in the Houston Astros. And they get a young and upcoming late 20s superstar shortstop for a couple of prospects. Meanwhile, the Padres are sitting there with Tatis with a broken shoulder, right? We don't know. Jared, you were there. You can tell me, maybe. And you got the Giants, who I don't know how the hell they're doing what they're doing. They have the best record in the MLB, and they grab Chris Bryant. But nonetheless, they scare me a little bit, Jared. They scare me a little bit. But the Dodgers, obviously what happened with Trevor Bauer, like I mentioned earlier in the Lakers segment, they needed some starting pitching. They have Clayton Kershaw hurt for a little bit. Dustin May is out for the rest of the year and maybe next year too with Tommy John surgery. You still have Julio Urias. You still have Walker Buehler. But a lot of other guys injured in that rotation. And the bullpen hasn't been playing as well as it should have. So they needed somebody. There was talk of maybe Jose Barrios, maybe a Kyle Gibson. But no, the Dodgers said, well, we're the Dodgers. We're Los Angeles. We're the champs. We're going to go out and get the best pitcher on the market. And that's Max Scherzer. And then, oh, yeah, by the way, we're going to give them a couple other prospects so we can get their top shortstop and not worry about the Corey Seager situation anymore. So it's the way the Dodgers work. I'm extremely happy. I'm excited about tonight's game. They blew the Diamondbacks out the last two games, just showing the power that they have. They're on a hot streak. Man, Jared, I'll say this. I would not want to play the Dodgers in the playoffs when you got Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer coming at you. Oh, yeah, and then the fourth pitcher maybe in the series is Julio Urias. I don't want to play that team. I don't. Jared, your thoughts on the Dodgers picking up Scherzer and Turner seemingly out of nowhere?
Baseball is it's a funny sport. And I really, really don't understand baseball sometimes. And this is where I do lean on you
Yes.
for these types of situations, because it was the Padres who were linked to Max Scherzer all week. Like, you had all of the baseball insiders and reporters who were saying this deal is about to happen. It's not done yet. It's 90% there. The Padres are about to upgrade their pitching. And I didn't necessarily hear Trey Turner in the Padres scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally all of a sudden, like at 11 o'clock, the 11th hour, the Dodgers somehow come in and swoop beneath the Padres, their division rival, right? And they not only get Max Scherzer, but they also get Trey Turner in this. Like, and here's why I say I don't understand baseball sometimes, because I get it when, if you're a team that is tanking, quote unquote, or you're not going to make the playoffs and you're kind of doing a fire sale, you're trying to get rid of players, get money off of the books, get draft picks or compensation in the return. I totally get that. But you're telling me that a fair trade was Max Scherzer, multiple-time Cy Young winner, right? And Trey Turner, who you just mentioned, a great shortstop, all-star, utility guy, top. And all the Dodgers had to give up was some prospects in return.
Well, let me explain.
Like that, to me, I don't understand, because I get it. These prospects are the two top prospects that the Dodgers had in their farm system, and that's great. But those guys, the chances of them turning out to be a Max Scherzer or a Trey Turner, I'm sorry, are not great odds, less than 50%. And Washington was okay with taking that in return. Like, you could have gotten the Dodgers for so much more. Draft picks. To me, I don't understand it, because to me, there's no way, like in the NBA or in the NFL, that this type of trade will go down. Like in the NBA, right? If the Lakers,
Jared,
really
stop
wanted,
it. You just traded Kuzma, Harrell, and all those guys. Stop it. We just talked about it. But let me
for one player.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Very good point. And for Trey. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Trey Turner just came in there out of nowhere at the very end. Like you said, the Dodgers just like, oh, hey, we want Max Scherzer. Oh, you know what? And we want Trey Turner in. Yeah, we'll give you an extra prospect. Yeah. Like, I'm sorry. I don't understand the correlation and how these all-star players get traded for peanuts, in a sense. And I'm sorry, like I said, no disrespect to these prospects, but we just haven't seen them play yet. It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, let's say this, okay? Let me explain to you who these two prospects are that were the headline of the deal, okay? Josiah Gray has been a top pitching prospect for a while now, and he was actually starting to help out the Dodgers. He'd throw about 4 or 5 innings, because his arm isn't ready for the MLB, and he was pretty good already, even as a youngster coming into the league. Is he a Walker Buehler? No, but Walker Buehler obviously is a perennial Cy Young guy, right? And I know what you're going to say. You're going to be like, well, they got Max Scherzer. Yeah, but this guy already last night started for the Nationals and looked impressive. Okay, and he's not even really supposed to be in the MLB yet. So he potentially could end up being an all-star pitcher, maybe even a Cy Young pitcher already. His makeup, the way he throws, it already looks impressive. Keibert Ruiz is a top 10 prospect in baseball. And when you look at the Dodgers, they don't need him because they have Will Smith. So they can just give him up, right? The Dodgers I think the Nationals knew that and were like, well, you got to give up Ruiz or Will Smith. Pick one. And they're like, well, we'll pick the guy that hasn't played in the MLB yet. But, Keibert Ruiz, I think like a week before this trade happened, hit 3 home runs in AAA in one game. He was dominating there. He has the skills as a catcher. He also can play multiple positions. A very valuable player and a top 10 prospect. Gray was top 25. And then the 2 other guys they gave up in this trade here were very highly valued prospects. They're not just random minor leaguers. So the Dodgers, it actually surprised me how much they gave up. As a diehard baseball fan and a guy that's been following baseball since I was like 2 years old, I was like, yeah, man, we gave up that much. And then I remembered, oh, yeah, we got Max Scherzer and Trey Turner. It's okay. All our problems are fixed. Oh, and I forgot we still have Gavin Lux. We still have Corey Seager. Well, at least for one more year. We still have Bellinger. Should I go on? Betts. I forgot about Betts.
No, you really shouldn't.
Yeah, so, no, we'll move on. But, I think this makes the Dodgers obviously top contenders in the National League and top contenders in the MLB. And, you know, it fixes a lot of the problems the Dodgers might have had coming up in the next 2 years, too, with a lot of their big-time players' contracts coming up or need to extend guys. They have Trey Turner on the books for this year and next year, so they have a little bit more time to decide what they want to do with Corey Seager. And if they decide to go away from him, they still have a guy that's been an all-star before. So, you know, and it also gives the ability for Corey Seager maybe to take over, Justin Turner's role at third base, kind of like an A-Rod did at third base, a bigger shortstop moving over to third base to play a position that fits his size a little bit better. So and then obviously with Max Scherzer, he's kind of an ageless wonder. The guy is in his late 30s and still just pumping gas, striking everybody out. And he reminds a lot of people of Justin Verlander, who it just seems like gets better as age goes. So, but you're right, man. I'll say you're right about the Padres thing because I'll say this, the MLB media is notorious for that. The rumor mill with the MLB it does not mean anything. And even when that trade was coming out, they're like, oh, he's going to the Padres. I'm like, deal isn't finalized. Doesn't mean anything in the MLB. And then boom, 5 hours later, I'm at work, and then all of a sudden, my dad texted me. He goes, they got Scherzer and Trey Turner, and I'm like, he's lying, he's making it up. It's a cruel joke. I don't know why he's saying stuff like this. And then I look it up, and it's like, oh yeah, we gave up our top prospects. I get it. That's what we did. So yeah, I'm happy. But Jared, let's talk about the rest of this trade deadline. Some other big moves. Here are, in the NL West, like I mentioned, Chris Bryant gets traded to the Giants. The Giants already with the best record. Chris Bryant coming over in one of his best years in the MLB. He comes over and he hits a home run his first day. Already looks impressive. The Giants are there, right? You look at the New York Mets. They're fighting for a playoff spot right now. They're leading the NL East. They get Javi Baez. Right, big addition there. Now he came up limping last night. I think he's okay, but that's a big acquisition. You look at the rest of the Cubs trades. They also traded Anthony Rizzo. They just gave up on everybody.
Another fire sale.
He goes to the New York Yankees. They trade Craig Kimbrell to the Chicago White Sox. So, he's the best closer in the league this year. And then also the You have the Cubs didn't trade anybody else. So the Cubs biggest thing in this trade deadline besides the Dodgers getting Scherzer and Trey Turner was the fact that the Cubs traded everybody as well. What are your thoughts on that? Just that type of fire sale. Two things I want to ask you. One, what does it say about the Cubs organization that they had three guys that were coming up under contract at the same time? They screwed that up. And then what do you say about them trading literally everybody besides Wilson Contreras, their top catcher, and not saving a single guy?
Right. I mean, contractually, I think they're going for some type of rebuild, right? I mean, you're right. You have
quick
three
rebuild,
guys.
Yeah.
I guess a quick rebuild. I don't know. This could be something that's prolonged or dragged out for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Contractually, when you have three guys coming up, and Rizzo, I mean, has been the captain of the Cubs, right?
That's surprising.
For how long? Yeah, that one to me is just one of those that it's just a little weird to see him not in a Cubs uniform in a sense. So for this organization, I think I can just simply say that I think they're really just going for real. They're looking for prospects. They're looking for draft picks, and they're really just giving up on the season. So I kind of feel bad for the players that are still on this Cubs team because the organization and management just basically said, hey, listen, we are not good enough to contend. We are going to give away not only, 2 or 3 of our best players, but our captain as well. And you guys are just going to have to ride it out for the rest of the year. And, who knows, win a couple games here, but more than likely end up in last place and go from there. So and that's why I said, and that's why I defer to you when it comes to baseball sometimes, because I don't understand how some of these trades and go through. It's like you're giving up a guy of Anthony Rizzo's status. What are you getting in return? Are you getting some type of, I don't want to say equal value because that's not always the case, but I mean, like I said, I feel like you're giving him up for peanuts. Like it's not a fair trade, because what did the Cubs get in return? Did they get draft compensation? Did they get high draft prospects or guys that can come into their farm system and potentially for next year have a starting role on the team? It's one thing to give up talent when you know that you're not contending, but what are you going to get in return, right? Like, are you looking 2, 3, 4 years down the road? Or are you just saying we need to get these guys off the books right now? Because if not, come next offseason, they're all going to want crazy contracts and we're going to be in a world of trouble because we won't be able to pay all 3 of those guys. Like, what is their long-term goal? That's what I would want to know from this team, because right now it looks blurry and I can't really see what they're trying to do from a team perspective in the next 3, 4, 5 years.
I just don't understand, like, specifically trading both Bryant and Baez. Like, I get trading an older guy. Yeah, albeit he's the captain, but like trading an older guy that you're not gonna pay, right? Like, I can even understand if the Dodgers would have traded Justin Turner like 2 years ago. Just be like, okay, well, the guy's in his mid-30s. Like, what are we gonna do now? Obviously, Justin Turner, another ageless wonder, kind of a guy that like leads the league almost in like average every year. Like, he just seems to be able, and he's already got like 20 home runs again. But I understand that. But what I don't understand is not, giving the bag to Baez or Bryant, because you already have Wilson Contreras under contract for a little bit. He's a very, very impressive catcher. I compare a top catcher to like a center in the NBA. Like, when you have one of those, you're solid, right? It's a rare thing. So you're going to keep that guy. But giving up Baez and Bryant, I didn't understand that. And I assume the load was pretty big that they got back. But it's similar to what you were talking about with the Nationals and what the Dodgers gave up. It's the fact that it's a bunch of prospects that aren't going to be ready to be all-stars until 2, 3, 4 years down the line, right? The Cubs have top prospects like Patrick Wisdom and Nico Horner and Wilson Contreras. I'll throw him in there, obviously. And some other guys on this roster that they like, and I think that's why they were comfortable giving up so much. But I don't understand why you don't keep 2 cornerstone guys, compete for a little bit, and just go it that way. But yeah, it is a little puzzling to me that they gave up both. It was very shocking, specifically when Baez went. He's rowing the boat. He's rowing the boat against. Sorry, I was gonna say, I don't know if you saw this video, Jared. He literally hit a walk-off hit against the Reds, Amir Garrett, he's fought the whole team before in the past, and he's literally rowing the boat with his bat as he's walking down, got fined for it. And then they trade him like the next day. I'm like, wait, and the crowd loved him the day before. It's strange, It is weird. And then you trade him to the NL too, the team that he's going to compete against them for years now within the Mets.
Right. Yeah, that's another head scratcher to me. Yeah. No, let's move on. We got to go.
Yeah, well, so I'll just mention a couple of the big trades. We won't analyze them, but obviously the Yankees also get Joey Gallo. They continue to want to be the biggest and roughest team. But strangely enough, Jared, I heard this last night. The Yankees are 29th in runs. Can you believe that with the roster that they have?
Not at all.
And then, by the way,
the stadium that they play in, all the home runs that they should be. Yeah, no.
That team is fighting for a wild card spot because the Red Sox and Toronto Blue Jays have been big this year. And then Garrett Cole just got COVID yesterday too. So just to compact the Yankee season, it's been crazy over there. The probably the other winner in the trade deadline here for the MLB was the Toronto Blue Jays. Already they have a very, very interesting team. They're led by Vlad Guerrero Jr., who looks like the next Barry Bonds. Okay, the way he hits balls. They're led by young guys like Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, veterans like George Springer. They have very good pitchers in Robbie Ray, Hyun-Jin Ryu. Then they add Jose Barrios, who was the Dodgers guy that they were supposed to get if the Padres got Scherzer. He's a very, very good young pitcher for the Minnesota Twins. And they go out and add a closer in Brad Hand. So Toronto is the other team that I think won this trade deadline. The Red Sox also bolstered their roster a little bit with a couple relievers and Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber will be back eventually this year, but he's not healthy right now. But yeah, so a couple other big trades. And I think when you're looking at the playoff hunt, the teams that won the trade deadline are the Dodgers, and I would say the Toronto Blue Jays. I'll throw the Giants up there getting Chris Bryant, too. Those are the three teams that really did a good job. One of the best trade deadlines ever, though. Crazy
A
stuff.
lot of movement.
With a lot of the stars being moved. Hopefully this kind of continues every year. Maybe the MLB can become a little bit of a NBA sort of with the stars getting moved. All right, let's move to the NFL. Jared, so much to talk about in this segment, too. Obviously, we got to keep it a little bit short, but we got to get 15, 20 minutes here to talk about the NFL. I think the biggest news, we'll start with this really quickly. Aaron Rodgers is just back with Green Bay. He's back with Green Bay. He's signed a contract, I believe, for one extra year besides this year. Is that correct, Jared? Just before I say something wrong.
Yeah.
So, he's on the books for two more, or for this year and next year. Crazy press conference he gives, being super honest about everything. But Jared, what's your thoughts on just kind of this saga with a weird, positive ending for the Packers? What happened? Why all of a sudden do we get all these analysts and everybody saying that Aaron Rodgers is going to go to Denver, he's never coming back, and then all of a sudden he just walks up the training camp like nothing happened?
First of all, my fantasy team wants to thank Rodgers because I still have him. So thank you very much for coming back and playing this year. That is going to bolster my team and give you a real opportunity to win. So first, thank you very much for that. But no, I mean, more seriously, I really, up until, the week that this happened, that Aaron Rodgers actually, because he was in California, he was nowhere near Green Bay, Wisconsin, right? And so he ended up taking a private jet to Wisconsin to be there, right? Literally, I think it was the day before or the day of that players were reporting for training camp. And I think the team, the Packers organization, literally had to come to terms and say, we can't go into the season with Jordan Love being our quarterback. Now, you drafted Jordan Love, right, 2 years ago at the end of the first round to be the eventual successor. But for whatever reason, Jordan Love, it doesn't seem like has matured enough. And I don't mean, that he's crazy off the field and anything like that. I just mean from a football standpoint, he has not improved enough to this confidence that they could give. To me, if Jordan Love was in a situation or at a point to where they thought that he was starting, then they would have more grounds to say, all right, Aaron Rodgers, we're going to call your bluff, right? Go ahead, go retire. We're not trading you, right? You're going to lose your entire contract, $30 million or whatever the heck it is. Go ahead, leave. And then it would have really been in Aaron Rodgers' court. But the fact that Jordan Love is not necessarily ready, that gave Aaron Rodgers, to me, more leverage to say, you guys need me more than I need you, right? And Aaron Rodgers, for people that think this was not about money. Aaron Rodgers has made hundreds of millions of dollars in his career. This was not about money. This was about respect, about saying, hey, listen, I want to be a part of the conversations when it comes to organizational moves, right? When it comes to, hey, we're thinking about keeping this receiver over this running back. Aaron Rodgers wants to be a part of that. He's not saying that he needs to make the final decision. He understands that he's not the owner. He's not the GM. He just wants to be involved, right? Like a guy with Jordy Nelson. When Jordy Nelson got traded from the Packers to the Raiders, Jordy Nelson was one of Aaron Rodgers' best friends on the team, right? And obviously they had a great connection from quarterback to receiver. So I think Aaron Rodgers was thrown off by that. Hey, man, what are you guys doing right now? When Randall Cobb left and they didn't re-sign Randall Cobb, Aaron Rodgers is sitting there saying, hey, how about you guys consult me a little bit first?
Yeah.
That's one of my go-to, third down security blanket receivers. You guys don't want to talk to me first and maybe say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Aaron Rodgers literally said it verbatim in his press conference. He said, maybe I can persuade the team to either keep a player or go in a different direction, right?
Yeah.
He just wants more of a voice. And I think it's justifiable because he is not only, right, a three-time MVP winner coming off of his best season of his career at the age of 35 or 36 or however old he is. He's also won a Super Bowl, right? So he has done a lot for that organization in 16 years, going on 17. It's not like he's just been an average quarterback that's only gotten the Packers to the playoffs a couple times in his career and never won a Super Bowl. They've gone to back-to-back NFC championship games and been very close to making it to the Super Bowl. So Aaron Rodgers deserves the respect that he's commanding. And really, the Packers had to come to that conclusion. It just took them a very long time. So yeah. I'm not surprised that Aaron Rodgers is back. What I am surprised is I thought it would have happened a lot sooner. I thought the Packers would have come to their senses a lot sooner. The fact that this took so long at that point last week, or right before Aaron Rodgers did show up, that's when I was saying, okay, he's really not coming back. Because I mean, we're literally a day before training camp, and so it was surprising to me that it had taken the organization that long to reach out to Aaron Rodgers and kind of say, okay, we're willing to concede and we will give you some of these concessions that you were looking for. And to me, like I said, I don't really understand why it was that hard for Green Bay. You see what Tom Brady has commanded from New England and now from Tampa Bay, and how successful that has been, right? Russell Wilson, the same thing. I think we can say that about a number of quarterbacks in this league, that yes, they have the ball in their hands at all times. They control basically wins and losses. Patrick Mahomes with the Kansas City Chiefs. Those guys aren't asking for the farm. They're just asking to be included in the conversations because you have given them 150, 250, and Patrick Mahomes' case, $500 million. Right? But I don't know, but I think you would want those guys, those franchise, face of the franchise type of guys, to be included in some of the conversations when it comes to personnel. Or, hey, we're thinking about, like I said, this receiver or this receiver. Do you have a rapport with one of them over the other? I don't know. I think you would want to make your quarterback happy because that is the guy that is going to win games for you. Doesn't seem like rocket science to me.
No, Jared, I'll tell you this, man. I love this, right? Two things I love. One, football's back. Hey, Jared, first of all, how good does it feel that we got training camp going on? We got people practicing. We can turn on the NFL Network. We can get actual football content. We're getting videos from Oxnard, all these Cowboys guys.
I'm going to Oxnard next week, baby.
Absolutely. I love it. I'll probably catch myself a Rams practice. I live about 5 minutes away from where they practice, so I got to get out there soon. And the Chargers. Too, they're about 15 minutes away from where I live. So we got to get to some of these training camps. Maybe I'll have to get out to Arizona as well, see my Cardinals. But I love the fact football's back. Hey, stop it, Jared, stop. At least my quarterback's legs are okay.
I'll get to your Cardinals in a minute because the next segment,
true,
next topic we're talking about directly.
Well, yeah, let me just say this about Aaron Rodgers. I love this. I love that he's just like, I'm going to do whatever I want. And you guys are going to let me. Because I'm the only reason your team is going to win a championship. So I'm going to do whatever I want. I'm going to walk into training camp with an office shirt. I'm going to walk in with sandals, a little bun in my hair. I'm going to throw. I'm going to throw whenever I want in practice. That contract you guys are going to give me? It's going to be all of what I want, and that's it. Right? Because, Jared, quarterbacks and specifically players in the NBA, or sorry, not the NBA, the NFL have long been kind of controlled by the top level executives and all that stuff, right? Like we see a lot of like the contracts, they don't get paid as much as they realistically should. Most of the players in the NBA or the NFL with what they give up their bodies to do, and specifically quarterbacks, they should have every leash possible to do whatever they want because of how much they sacrifice every single year, So it's really impressive that Aaron Rodgers is out here doing this, kind of manipulating the situation. And I love it, right? You mentioned something about that Aaron Rodgers just wants more communication. My Arizona Cardinals were giving Kyler Murray input on who he wanted to draft this year. Kyler Murray looks like he's a 17-year-old kid. And he's
hasn't won a damn thing yet. No offense.
Yeah. No, of course, hasn't even made the playoffs. He's deciding what the franchise is going to do. Right? Hey, come on. But Aaron Rodgers isn't supposed to? I mean, I know they got like 400,000 owners, literally. Like, no joke. But, it seemed like a ridiculous situation. I'm happy for Aaron. I'm happy for the Packers because they figured this out. Jared, I always love just more good teams in the NFL. I like watching bad football. So to be able to watch Aaron Rodgers in this Green Bay team, to watch Devontae Adams probably smoke everybody in fantasy football again this year like he did. Jared, I'm happy that Aaron Rodgers is back on your fantasy team. I hope I get to draft him this year in one of my few drafts that I'm in. But yeah, no, it's a good situation. I'm glad this saga's over, right? It needed to happen. I didn't want to see Aaron Rodgers retire. I didn't want to see Aaron Rodgers hold out and have this weird situation. I wanted to see him be on a team. And whether that was being traded or whether that was being signing back with the Packers and just figuring it out, I am happy. So, but I just love the situation, man. I love that he's taking control. I love that a player in the NFL is doing what he wants to do because Aaron Rodgers deserves it. That franchise is, you can blame the franchise for the reason they don't have multiple Super Bowls. It's not Aaron Rodgers. Okay, and last year, the debacle with the play calling and all that stuff in that important playoff game where they kicked a field goal instead of going for a touchdown with their top quarterback. I think he's like, if we ever do that again, I'm quitting. F you guys, right? Like, we're not doing that. But crazy situation. All right, Jay, I got breaking news on the podcast right now. I don't know if you've seen, but we had a topic that we're going to talk about today that has now been elevated to a status that's much worse for this team than we ever thought. Guys, when we were talking pre-podcast, of course, we're going to talk about Carson Wentz, okay? He's out for 5 to 12 weeks, right? And the Colts are screwed, right? I have these quarterbacks in mind that I think they could sign in the meantime. But, the Colts, they go on a one-year flyer with Carson Wentz, and he gets hurt again, right? It's funny if you're like kind of a mean person that likes laughing at injuries. And it's just sad if you're a Colts fan. To break Colts fans' hearts even more, Quentin Nelson just had the same injury happen to him. So the Colts are now out. No joke, Jared. No joke. Quentin Nelson is out for 5 to 12 weeks now with the same exact injury that Carson Wentz had. Quentin Nelson's one of my favorite players in the NFL. Unbelievable lineman. They just lost their top offensive lineman and Carson Wentz in the same week. Breaking news. Jerry, I went on ESPN really quickly while we were talking in the MLB segment and was like, oh, let me update to see if anything else has happened in the NBA. And I see Nelson out, same injury. Oof. First thought.
I'm blaming the Colts grass. I'm blaming the practice facility. I'm blaming wherever they are. I'm blaming the maintenance guys. I'm blaming anyone that has to do with the facilities and the maintenance. Any of that, that's who I'm blaming. Wow, if you are a Colts, like, first of all, I do feel bad, right? Obviously, these are just kind of freak injuries that are a part of the game, but very unfortunate, especially in training camp. For Carson Wentz coming over from the Eagles, he gets a fresh start with a former coach. He already knows the system. He's got a better offense around him, right? A great offensive line. Everything is set up for him to succeed, hopefully. And then this injury and arguably the best guard, like you mentioned, in all of football, and Quentin Nelson has that same injury. Man, the Colts just, I'm not saying that they were going to come out and just win this division outright, because obviously the Tennessee Titans are there and they're going to have something to say about that. Yeah. But I think the Colts were going to be real contenders this year. And now the fact that they are potentially not going to have their quarterback for at least the first 4 or 5 games of the season and the best guard in the league for that same amount of time, I don't know. And also, if I'm not mistaken, the Colts have the toughest strength of schedule in all of football, or at least the first half of the year, right? Their first 5 games are against, let me see right here. Their first 5 games versus Seattle, versus the Rams.
Oh my God.
At the Titans, at Miami, at Baltimore.
Ooh,
Miami seems like the only potential winnable game there. Baltimore, don't see it. Tennessee, division rival, they're just going to run down your throat. The Rams with Matthew Stafford now.
Number one defense.
Right?
Yeah.
And Seattle with Russell Wilson, I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up scoring points against that. It's going to be a rough start for a Colts team, in an organization that I think had a lot of high hopes. Not to say that they can't bounce back, and hopefully these players come back sooner rather than later, because a 5 to 12 week timeline, at least for Carson Wentz, is very broad, right?
Yeah.
Usually you'll see, okay, 5 to 7 weeks, or if it's more on the longer side, you'll see 10 to 12 weeks. It's not too often that you see a 5 to 12 week timeline for an injury, which, we're hoping for the 5 week scenario, but I think you just
Yeah.
never know. It depends on the player and how fast their bodies can recover. So, yeah, that's
No,
not what you want to
literally,
hear.
Jared, literally, maybe besides Darius Leonard, like this is the worst scenario possible because of that early schedule. Because again, Jared, we also know that they play the Jaguars and Texans twice. So that's probably 4 wins right there that you just get on your schedule already. You can beat a division rival in the Titans. That's not out of the question. And then the rest of the schedule is difficult. But like when you don't have your quarterback or your offensive lineman for even some of those first couple of games, like the Colts realistically needed to go at least 2-3 in that beginning of the season. I think we'd all be like, oh, that's fine, right? That's a tough schedule, right? If the schedule gets easier after that, we're good, right? And like I said, you get 4 wins in the Jaguars and Texans, no matter what. So the fact that these guys are out early, it just, I mean, I'm putting the death nail in the season already. Like realistically, I'll say this: they have a great running game and they have a good defense, so you still can win some games. And if you get Carson Wentz and Quentin Nelson back relatively quickly, you still have a chance at the playoffs in this division. The Titans now become the front runners easily for me, and I think the Titans got worse this year too. So it's like this division's kind of becoming a little bit of a stinker to me as far as like the interest in it. I was excited to see Carson Wentz play. I like their offensive line. I liked their offensive line, and I love their defense. But yeah, this is tough. It's just tough, man. It's tough. And with Nelson now, it just compounds it. And, like I said, though, they come back quick. It's going to be interesting. But I think if this injury really hinders Carson Wentz, I tweeted this the other day. I just think it's done as a starter, as a franchise quarterback for Carson Wentz. He's just too unreliable. It's injuries, but I just think with him, I think after this year, it's going to be tough unless he has just some miraculous comeback with the Colts and they make the playoffs and he has a run. That I just think it's over for him as a starting quarterback. Unfortunately, it's injuries, it's bad play with the Eagles. It's a sad story because he's a real fun guy to watch, but it's just the NFL is just not for long, man. Joe, this is not for long, and you can't be getting hurt like this every single year. You can't. Doesn't happen. This was his year to prove it, and he gets hurt. Freak injury or not, it probably had something to do with that ACL, right? You step a little different nowadays, and maybe he broke his foot. But losing Quentin Nelson, that is tough. Tough. All right, last segment of the day. We're going to talk about the NFL implemented a new rule that says, a team has to forfeit a game if COVID affects it, essentially. I'm not going to go into the details of the rule because we don't have enough time. But, this essentially means that any teams with unvaccinated players, if those unvaccinated players cause there to be, you have not enough players on the roster due to quarantining, that team is forfeiting a game. They're not going to be canceling games, moving games to Tuesday, all that stuff like they did last year. The NFL is saying, no. We're having a normal season, and if you can't get your players to get vaccinated or your players don't want to go outside and go to concerts when they're not vaccinated and they affect this league, we're not going to have any of that. It's unprecedented in sports that we've seen this, right? Baseball's still allowing a COVID list. The NBA allowed a COVID list. They didn't allow like Chris Paul being hurt or not hurt, getting COVID. They didn't allow that to affect the playoffs. They said, no, you're gone for 2 weeks. You got 10 days figured out. You're good, right? Trey Turner for the Dodgers, we talked about earlier. He's not able to play for the Dodgers yet because he's still in COVID protocol. So he can't be with the team yet. Unfortunately, he won't be there tonight. I'm disappointed. But, so this is unprecedented, Jared, that we've seen this. What are your thoughts on the NFL implementing a rule like this while the other sports have not?
Yeah, that's, I think this is the NFL stepping out and they don't, yes, they watch and see what other leagues do, what other sports leagues and franchises do. But from a league standpoint, I think they're trying to be above everyone else. They're trying to be the leaders, the front runners of all of this.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I necessarily agree. I think I can understand where the league is coming from this sense, and you brought it up. The fact that, they don't want to have Tuesday and Wednesday games anymore. Yes, I think the NFL would love to play every single day and dominate every single day of the week, but we've obviously have Sunday football, we've got Monday night football, and now we have Thursday night football that is regular during the season as well. And I think they're saying we are done trying to mix match all these games, and the vaccine is out there for people to take. Just like in other parts, like the president came out and said, if you are a government worker, you are now going to have to prove that you are vaccinated, and if not, you're going to have certain protocols in place for you. Just like with these athletes, at least specifically for the NFL, right? You mentioned it, you touched on it. If a player is unvaccinated and chooses to not get the vaccine, when they travel for games, they're not going to be able to leave the hotel. They're going to have to continue to wear their mask at all times, except for when they're in their room, right? That when they practice, they're going to have to wear a mask. If they're in the weight room, they're going to have to wear their mask. If they're eating, they're going to have to eat at like a separate table or in a separate area. They're not going to be able to eat with their teammates. And so there are all these things that kind of pile up. And we saw the effects that it took physically and mentally on people, in this past year, right? And so those same things are going to continue to happen for people, at least in the NFL, that do not get this COVID vaccine. So, we can't sit here and force people to take it, but I think the NFL is trying to basically send a strong message and say, if you are the reason why a team is having to forfeit a game, we are not going to make up for it. We are not going to give you an out or extend a leash or extend a bone to you. You had an opportunity to get tested, or get vaccinated, right? It's very easy to get vaccinated. They're all over the place now. You can go to CVS, you can go to anywhere basically right now and get vaccinated. And I think the NFL is just simply saying we're going back to normal and we are done with all of this. So you will have players that and coaches we've seen. Coaches I know for the one coach for the Patriots, and I forget who the other coach was, who have already been relieved of their duties because they have chosen not to get vaccinated and the teams have let them go. We've seen head coaches like Mike Zimmer yesterday on Monday come out, and Ron Rivera, the head coach for the Washington football team, who actually, just got over, who just beat cancer and is more susceptible to these types of diseases, who have both come out and basically been very candid about their thoughts on players who are not vaccinated, right? They're saying they don't understand why players won't do it. And even if they do have a specific belief in not getting vaccines or anything like that, they're basically saying you are hurting not just yourself, but you're hurting your teammates. You're hurting your family members. You are hurting other people around you that you love. And so, it's not just the NFL that is coming out with these guidelines. You're now seeing organizations and coaches specifically who are coming out and publicly speaking their minds about what they think about all of this. So, I think it's very interesting. I'm not surprised that the NFL did this because they are not ones to be shy about things like this. And I just hope that, the NFL and us as a whole, as a people, can get to a point, a percentage to where we have that herd immunity, right? And I think that's where teams are trying to be. Teams are trying to be at the 85 to 90% range, including, players, team personnel, coaches, everyone on down the line. The majority of those people are vaccinated to where a potential spread cannot happen within an organization.
Yeah.
So
no.
Very interesting. I'm just
very interesting.
It's going to happen. I can already see it right now. There's going to be a week when it's going to pop up, and I just hope that when it does happen to that team, that they are vaccinated, because then there is a potential to postpone the game or do something like that. Yeah. But if it happens to a team and it happens to unvaccinated players, they think the NFL is joking around right now. The NFL is not joking. You will lose the game. It will be your fault why you lost. Not because you dropped a pass, not because you let the defensive end get by you and sack the quarterback, not because you gave up a long pass, anything like that. You let your entire team and organization down. And that could mean the difference between making the playoffs and not making the playoffs.
Yeah, no, with the NFL, with this rule, they are implementing power, and they're also trying to implement a level of safety too, right? The NFL could have just said, oh, we're not going to test anymore, right? And that, oh, we're not going to let this affect season. But they say, you know what? We're going to be safe. We're going to try to get as many players vaccinated as possible. And we're going to, punish those teams that have guys that go out and do stupid things and give themselves COVID and all that stuff, right? I'll start with this. Jared, I agree with you. I don't care what people do, okay? If you have a reason you don't want to get the vaccine, that's okay with me because I don't know what you're researching. That's fine, right? If you get vaccinated, I have no problem with that, right? I initially wasn't the biggest fan of getting vaccinated, but I got it because, I heard about this rule in the NFL, and I've been trying to make an NFL comeback for a while, and no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, I got it because I wanted life to be normal for myself, and I have good genetics. I don't get sick often, so I was like, I don't think anything's gonna happen to me, right? But I've known people that have been affected by COVID, for months. No joke. Like they had COVID and they're still being affected by it. So I get the risk. I understand how bad that thing can be. I still don't care if you get the vaccine. Like, what I'm saying? Like, you have your own choice. You do whatever you want. But every company has that choice too. And the NFL decided to implement this rule and say, you know what? We're going to test. We're going to be safe. And we don't want to have to cancel games. NBC means a lot to us. ESPN means a lot to us. Fox means a lot to us. This is money, man. It's money. The NFL does not want to be affected by a guy's political beliefs or a guy, deciding to go out and do something stupid, even if they're unvaccinated and it has nothing to do with political beliefs, right? It's just that's the way this is. The NFL has the right. Every company has the right. The company I work for does not force me to do that, does not force me to get fired from work if I don't have it. But they make everybody wear masks. So, it's going to be interesting. I'll say this, though. Dude, I think this rule really affected the league because I know the Cardinals were in the bottom 5 in vaccines, and then all of a sudden they're in the top 5. What happened? And then all of a sudden, all these guys go into COVID protocol because they got the vaccine and they got sick. they got the vaccine, so now they're feeling vaccine effects. And it's hilarious. Right, like this has happened, and I know the Cardinals probably their organization is like, hey, we want to make the playoffs this year, and we don't want to lose by one game like we did last year. So can you just unless you explain to us a reason why you just can't get it, can you just go get it? And I hope one of those guys is Hopkins, too, because I don't want DeAndre Hopkins, who came out very vehemently against this rule, said he was going to retire, had kind of a temper tantrum online. I hope he decided to get it. But it's the one guy in the league. Biasly, the one guy in the whole world I hope got it. That's it. I just hope. But yeah, it's a very interesting rule, Jared, and it's unprecedented in sports so far. Like I said, the NBA is allowing their players to get COVID. The NHL allowed their players to get COVID, and they just kind of punished them by forcing them to be out for a week or two. But MLB too. Like I said, Garrett Cole already being affected. So yeah, right. Very, very interesting stuff. All right, guys, that's the podcast for today. Long one today, but so much to talk about. We will be back next week, probably talking about a little bit more of the NBA and potentially the NFL. And coming up in the next few weeks, we will have a college football preview and we will have an NFL preview. We will have guests. We will have everybody on the podcast talking about it. Maybe I'll bring my suit back, Jared. Maybe I'll bring my suit.
We might need the commish back.
Absolutely, and exactly. And I was really wrong about the draft this year, though. So maybe I'll have to figure it out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, and we will be back next week and the weeks coming, talking football, talking baseball, talking every single sport. But for this podcast, we are done. I am Nick Nenad,
and I'm Jared Smith,
and we'll see you next week.